This lecture is going to focus on the methodological approach for monitoring marine litter on beaches and generating fit-for-purpose data through a participatory science approach. Let's start with a few key terms and definitions. How is monitoring defined? Monitoring is a long-term standardized measurement, observation, evaluation, and reporting of the environment in order to define status and trends. And when we talk about marine litter monitoring and marine litter monitoring programs, these are programs that aim to provide information on the types, quantities, distribution, and impacts of marine litter, to identify the sources of marine litter in order to facilitate the shortlisting and the definition of targeted measures, and also to assess the effectiveness of the management measures put in place in order to address the problem. Participatory science is a term that refers to research conducted in partnership between trained experts and members of a community. These members of the community can be, for example, environmental NGOs, which in many cases are groups of professionals with strong competencies in environmental research, dedicated to the production of accurate, up-to-date research and data on the most pressing environmental issues. Of course, these members of a community can be researchers, can be competent authorities, can be managers of marine protected areas or coastal protected areas, can be educators and students, and can be also citizens. And this is why oftentimes we hear the term citizen science. The key legislative frameworks related to marine litter and marine litter monitoring at European level include the Marine Strategy Framework Directive and Descriptor 10 on marine litter, but also the Plastic Strategy and the Single-Use Plastics Directive, which was quite recently, in the last couple of years, adopted. When it comes to European regional sea level, there are the European Regional Sea Conventions, such as the Barcelona Convention, the OSPAR Convention, the Helcom Convention, and the Bucharest Convention for the Black Sea. When it comes to the Mediterranean, the Barcelona Convention and the ecosystem approach, as well as the regional plan for marine litter management, are the key legislative frameworks related to marine litter monitoring and management actions. At European level, almost a decade ago, a technical group was put together in order to support the European member states in terms of setting up their marine litter monitoring programs. This group holds very special expertise on different aspects related to marine litter and marine litter monitoring, and it has generated a wealth of documents focusing on different aspects of the problem and the issue. One very important document has been the Guidance on Monitoring of Marine Litter in European Seas, which was published in 2013 and which provides the methodological approach for monitoring macro litter on beaches. One major groundbreaking recent policy advance when it comes to beach macro litter was the unanimous adoption by European member states of a threshold value at European level. This threshold value of 20 litter items per 100 meter stretch of coastline defines when good environmental status has been reached. So a beach that has less than 20 litter items per 100 meter stretch is considered to be in good environmental status. Coming back now to the guidance document on marine litter monitoring, in 2021, the technical group worked in order to further define the classification list for litter items, and this led to the publication of a joint list of litter categories for marine macro litter monitoring. This list, the joint list, is meant to be applied in all marine matrices, in all marine compartments, including beaches, the sea surface, the sea floor, and biota. And the aim of such a list is to ensure that fit-for-purpose, comparable, and reliable data are being generated. When we talk about macro litter, we talk about items that are 2.5 centimeters in the longest dimension. Now, which are the key elements of the methodological approach for monitoring macro litter on beaches? First of all, this can be clustered in two main categories: the elements of a monitoring strategy, the experimental design, and the elements of the survey protocol. The monitoring strategy includes the site selection criteria, the frequency and timing of the survey, and the sampling unit. And the survey protocol includes aspects related to litter sampling, litter size classes and classification, and litter removal and disposal considerations. So let's take a closer look at the different site selection criteria. First of all, the sites to be included in a monitoring activity have to demonstrate, to represent a variety of locations that are, for example, in the vicinity of ports or harbors, in the vicinity of river mouths, in coastal urban areas, in tourist destinations, and in relatively remote areas, while the special features of the survey sites have to be the following. First of all, they have to have a minimum length of 100 meters, to have a low or moderate slope, a clear access to the sea, and to be accessible to the survey teams throughout the years. Ideally, the survey sites should not be cleaned, and the survey activities should not pose any threat to endangered or protected species. Here are just a few examples of sampling locations in the Mediterranean. And now let's take a closer look at the frequency and timing of the surveys. The surveys should be implemented 4 times per year, in autumn and specifically in October, in winter and specifically in January, in spring and specifically in April, and then in July when it comes to the summertime. Regarding the sampling unit is defined as a fixed section of the beach covering the entire area from the strand line to the back of the beach. Within this methodology, and the methodology that is being described as mentioned before in the 2013 TGML guidelines, but also in the upgraded methodological approach that will be soon published by the same group, the width of the sampling unit is 100 meters, and it extends all the way to the back of the beach. The back of the beach needs to be explicitly identified using coastal features such as the presence of vegetations, dunes, cliffs, a road or a fence, or any other anthropogenic structures such as seawalls. Another important aspect has to do with where to place the sampling unit. Sampling units should represent the general characteristics of the survey site and the general state of litter in the survey site. Therefore, when we visit the survey site, we have to exclude from the potential location of the sampling unit, we have to exclude the accumulation areas, and we have to exclude those areas that present some special features. So, for example, typically the edges of the beach are being excluded because in some cases they might tend to accumulate litter. Also, the entrance of the beach, which oftentimes serves also as a parking lot, should be excluded because a lot of litter items are encountered in the entrance of the beaches, as well as the area in front of, for example, hotels. And then the coastline is being separated in 100-meter sections, and the sampling unit is being randomly selected among one of these potential sections. In addition, in order to obtain a more representative sample when surveying marine litter, it is advised to survey 2 transects, and these 2 transects should be separated at least by a distance of 50 meters. Of course, there are instances where we will encounter very heavily littered beaches. And surveying a 100-meter stretch might be very demanding when it comes to human resources and the time that needs to be invested in order to collect and classify all the litter items. In that case, it is recommended to survey a 50-meter stretch of beach. When it comes to the sampling process, there are different approaches that can be deployed, and there is a wide variety of ways to move, either in parallel or perpendicular to the strand line, and also different numbers of surveyors can participate in this activity. The important part of the sampling process is to collect all the litter items that are larger than 2.5 in the longest dimension. Of course, within this lower limit definition, some smaller items that are marginally in the dimension between 2 and 2.5, like plastic cups and cigarette butts, should be also collected. And this brings us to the classification of the different litter items, which should be made in accordance with the joint list. The joint list is an upgrade of the 2013 master list, and it is characterized by a hierarchical structure. This hierarchical structure was put in place in order to ensure comparability of results across European regional seas, and also to allow for different levels of aggregations of the results obtained through the different surveys. So, how does the hierarchical structure look like? First of all, at the first level, we have the classification of litter items per material type. So, for example, we have artificial polymer materials, we have wooden processed materials made of processed wood, we have materials made from carton and paper, from glass and ceramics. And on the second level, we have the use. So items can be plastic food consumption related or plastic fishery related items, and we will come back to that. At the third level, we have specific types of litter items, for example, plastic food bottles and containers, or plastic tableware, cups and cutlery. And the third level can break down further. For example, when it comes to the food bottles and containers, it can break down to plastic drink bottles. And these also can break down at the fifth level depending on their dimension. So they can be smaller than 0.5 liters or bigger. When it comes to the use categories, 13 use categories have been introduced. So these include agriculture-related, aquaculture-related, clothing, building and construction-related, food consumption-related, fisheries-related, personal hygiene and care-related, medical-related, recreation-related, smoking-related, vehicle-related, hunting-related, and obviously there is also a use category entitled undefined use, simply because some litter items cannot be attributed to one of these uses because they're being used in different ways. The idea of the use categories is to provide an indication of the actual human-induced activities generating these litter items and facilitate the decision-making process when it comes to management measures. And this is, in addition to that, a coding system has been developed to further facilitate the aggregation of the results and the reporting process. So, the J-code list, a list of 183 litter items, should be used in order to classify marine litter in beach litter surveys. And in order to facilitate that process, detailed descriptions have been developed for each of these litter type categories. It has been observed by the analysis of different marine litter data sets obtained at the pan-European level that surveyors in the past understood different things when it comes to the titles of the different litter items categories. And therefore, it was important to develop such detailed definitions in order to ensure that all surveyors throughout European regional seas are recording and reporting the same litter items under the different litter type categories. Furthermore, in order to facilitate that process, an online photo catalog has been developed by GRC and the TGML group and can be found on the link provided on this slide. So, once on the field, there are some important tips that should be taken into consideration in order to enable a faster monitoring activity. So, for example, the items that easily break or get entangled and are weathered should be sorted and classified on site, but the rest of the items could be easily collected and transported to the laboratory in order then to undergo through the classification process. Also, in order to speed up the survey, the items can be first grouped in broader categories and then they can be counted together. So, on this slide, you can see such a grouping where all cigarette butts are put together, all drinking bottle or plastic drinking bottle caps have been put together, and so on and so forth. So then all these items can be counted together and can be introduced on the list, while doing that one by one might take more time. Then also, arranging the different litter items on the field list according to the most frequent items found can facilitate the recording of the litter items found. So this 183 entries list can be arranged in such a way. So, for example, depending on the different features of a beach, we can have at the top, for example, all the fishing related items in case that these are the ones most frequently encountered, or for example, we can have single-use plastics related items at the top simply because this beach is used more for tourism and recreational purposes. In any case, the analysis of typical marine litter datasets has shown that usually 80% of the litter items collected on a coastline belong to a group of 10 to 20 litter type categories. So basically, even if the list seems quite long, at the end of the day, only a reduced number of litter items of this list will be found on a specific survey site. But of course, which items will be found depends on the different pressures exerted on the survey site. Last but not least, unusual or not recognizable litter items should be photographed and then they could be further assessed back in the laboratory. So here, I would like to present the results of a research that we have conducted a couple of years ago with the involvement of 7 environmental NGOs as a showcase of a participatory science initiative. And beach litter surveys were carried out in 5 Mediterranean countries where a total of 23 sites were surveyed. Some of them were located in coastal and marine protected areas. And here you can have an overview of the different features of the beaches, whether they were semi-rural, remote, urban, and whether they were in the vicinity of river mouths or not, and what kind of economic activities were taking place in these survey sites. Typical results, for example, when it comes to the composition of marine litter, focus either on the amount of the different materials. So, for example, in our case, 90% of the litter items collected were made out of plastics. Then also, we counted the amount and aggregated results either on single-use plastics found, non-single-use plastics found, and non-plastics, and we see that single-use plastics were accounted 38% of the total litter items found, and also we can see here a list of the top 10 litter items found. So we see that plastic pieces were the most frequent item found, followed by cigarette butts and filters, plastic cups from drinks, cotton bud sticks, polystyrene pieces, straws and stirrer, and so on and so forth. and these results indicate that the majority of beaches were located in tourism and recreational locations. When we take a closer look, of course, at the beach level, we see that, for example, the amount of single-use plastics differ depending on the special characteristics and features of the different beaches. So in some cases, it can almost reach 67% of the total litter items collected. And this, of course, indicates that this beach is mainly used for tourism and recreational activities. But for example, in other areas, the amount of single-use plastics can be around 18 to 20%, indicating that these locations are subjected to other types of human-induced activities. And with that, I would like to finish this lecture and thank you for your attention.